Good morning. Happy Friday. We're starting with chapter 6 where we left off, starting the chapter Parents' Night. It says Ramona stood inside her new closet, pretending she was in an elevator. She slid open the door and stepped out into her new room, which she pretended was on the 10th floor. There she drew a deep breath, inhaling the fragrance of the new wood and the flat smell of sheetrock, which her father was going to paint when he found time. Her mother had been too busy to find curtains for the windows or to clean the smudges of putty from the glass. But Ramona did not mind. Tonight she was going to sleep for the first time in her very own for 6 months room, the only room in the house with a sliding closet door and windows that opened out instead of up and down. Ramona, Howie's grandmother is here, called Mrs. Quimby. We're going now. Ramona stepped back into her closet, slid the door shut, pressed an imaginary button, and then, when her imaginary elevator had made its imaginary descent, stepped out onto the real first floor and faced a real problem. Her mother and father were leaving for Parents' Night. After Ramona had said hello to Howie's grandmother, "Say hello to Howie's grandmother, Ramona." She flopped down in a chair and peeled off one end of a Band-Aid to examine her sore knee. She was disappointed when Howie's grandmother did not notice. "I don't see why you have to go to Parents' Night," Ramona said to her mother and father. "It's probably boring." "We want to hear what Mrs. Griggs has to say," said Mrs. Quimby. Stop, eat your strawberries. "We want to hear what Mrs. Griggs has to say," said Mrs. Quimby. This is what worried Ramona. "And I want to meet the famous Mr. Cardoza," said Mr. Quimby. "We've been hearing so much about him." "Daddy, you're really going to like him," said Beezus. "Do you know what he said when I got 5 wrong on my math test? He said, 'Good. Now I can see what it is you don't understand.' And then he said he was there to help me understand. And he did." "We're going over to Howie's house after Parents' Night," said Mrs. Quimby, "but we won't be late." Beezus made a face and said to Ramona, "That means they'll talk about their children." "They always do." Ramona knew her sister spoke the truth. Mr. Quimby smiled as he went out the door. "Don't worry, we won't reveal the family secrets." Beezus went off to her room, eager to do her homework on the new to her desk. Ramona pulled off the other Band-Aid and examined her other knee. She wondered if what Mrs. Griggs was sure to say about Susan's owl would be considered a family secret. She poked her sore knee and said, "Ouch," so Howie's grandmother could not help hearing. When Mrs. Kemp failed to ask, "Why, Ramona, how did you hurt your knee?" Ramona stuck the Band-Aid back in place and studied her sitter. Mrs. Kemp, who wore glasses with purple frames, was not the sort of sitter who played games with children. When she came to sit, she sat. She was sitting on the couch knitting something out of green wool while she looked at an old movie on television, some boring thing about grown-ups who talked a lot and didn't do much of anything. Ramona liked good lively comedies with lots of children and animals and grown-ups doing silly things. Next to that, she liked cat food commercials. Ramona picked up the evening paper from the floor beside her chair. "Well, I guess I'll read the paper," she said, showing off for Howie's grandmother. She studied the headlines, making a sort of mental buzz when it came to words. Hold on. You can have more after. When she came to words that she could not read, to run for, she read, zing, to go up, she turned a page, to play what, she wondered, with what a little feeling of triumph discovered that the were going to play ball. "And what is the news tonight?" asked Mrs. Kemp, her eyes on the television set. "Attention at last! Somebody is going to play some kind of ball," answered Ramona, proud to have actually read something in the newspaper. She hoped Mrs. Kemp would say, "Why, Ramona, I had no idea you were such a good reader." "Oh, I see," said Mrs. Kemp, a remark Ramona knew grown-ups made when they were not interested in conversation with children. Ramona tried again. I know how to set the table, she boasted. Instead of saying, you must be a big help to your mother, Mrs. Kemp only murmured, with her eyes on the television set. Ramona said, I have a room of my own, and tonight I'm going to sleep in it all by myself. That's nice, said Mrs. Kemp absently. Ramona gave up. Mrs. Kemp did not know the right answers. The clock said 7:30, even though Ramona had fought long and hard for the right to stay up until 8:15 and was now working on 8:30. She decided that since her parents were not there, she would not lose ground in her battle for a later bedtime by going to bed early to try out her new room. She said goodnight and took her bath without using her washcloth, so she would not have to waste time wringing it out and hanging it up. She got into bed, turned out her light, said her prayers, asking God to bless her family, including Picky Picky. And there she lay, a big girl, alone in her bed in her very own room. Unfortunately, in spite of pretending bedtime had come, Ramona was wide awake with nothing to do but think. She lay there wondering what was happening at school. Guilt over Susan's owl grew heavy within her. What would happen when her mother and father heard the whole terrible story? They would be so disappointed in Ramona, and that's what they'd be. And nothing made Ramona feel worse than knowing that her parents were disappointed in her. In spite of Howie's grandmother knitting on the couch, the house seemed empty. Ramona thought about how bad she was. Ramona thought about the gorilla in the book in her bookcase and wished she had not. The sound of gunfire and a woman's scream came from the television set. Nothing to be scared about, Ramona told herself, just the TV. She wished her window had curtains. Although Ramona dreaded knowing what Mrs. Griggs would say, she felt she had to know. As Beezus had predicted, her parents were sure to talk on and on with Howie's parents about their children. Mrs. Kemp would say Howie needed to learn to be creative. And Ramona's mother would say Ramona needed to learn to be responsible like Beezus. There was no telling what the fathers would say, although fathers, Ramona knew, did not spend as much time as mothers thinking up ways to improve their children. Ramona decided to act. She got out of bed and pattered down the hall in her bare feet. Howie's grandmother looked up from her knitting. It's past your bedtime, Ramona, she said. So time had passed after all. I know, said Ramona. Could not resist boasting a little. I have to leave a note for my mother. On the notepad by the television, she carefully printed, Come here, mother, come here to me. No need to sign the note. Her mother would know who it was from, because Beezus wrote cursive. Ramona left her note on the table. Okay, wait just a second. Ramona left her note on the table beside the front door, where the family always looked for mail and messages. She sidled closer to Howie's grandmother, pretending interested in her knitting, which appeared to be a small sweater of strange shape. Is that for a doll? Asked Ramona. All right, I'm going to stop there because there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably another 10 pages. Probably another 10 pages of 11, 12. Okay, so there's still about 12 pages left in this chapter, so we still don't know yet. So you still have time today to make predictions about what you think is going to happen at the parents' night, and what are her parents going to either find out. Do you think Mrs. Griggs is going to tell Ramona's parents what she did with the paper owl? I don't know. Tell me whether you think she is or not. Tell me whether you think maybe Mrs. Griggs will just say that she's a wonderful student, or if you think she'll actually tell them the truth, or maybe she'll ask to speak to them privately after. So let me know what you think. You still have a day to do that. We are leaving off on page 107. Okay, you guys, have a great weekend. I miss you so much. Enjoy your time. Try to get outside and keep yourself healthy. Drink lots of water. and wash your
And
hands.
lots of
All right.
juice.
I miss you
Bye.
guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.